learn how to thrive and grow in every aspect of life and business using real, raw, and 100% no bullshit proven tactics. My name is Ivan Temelkov, and I'm your host. Today on the podcast, I am joined by Mr. Brandon Elliott. What's going on, man?
Ivan, what's happening, brother? I'm doing well, man. I appreciate you for having me on. How's your day been?
Absolutely. Absolutely, dude, man. You've had an exciting day. Right before we hit record, we're chatting about having some wins. So congratulations, man. Anything that happens on a Friday that's a win is a win. Is a
Yeah.
good way to set the weekend, right? To set the tone, to set the experience. I want to first, before we jump into a convo with you, just do a quick intro about who you are, so listeners and viewers can understand a little bit more about you. So, top 100 in finance of 2020. Brandon is a leading authority in real estate and credit, experienced and proven results utilizing credit to invest in real estate and implement the Burr strategy. Okay, that is a catchy name. Brandon owns several thriving businesses, and that includes real estate, credit repair, trade lines, Walmart automation, stores, private mentorships that include high profile students like former NFL player Dean Rogers, Terry Thayer, and Nick Perry. And I know there's a little bit more to your story here, but I'm going to save that for you to share with the rest of the listeners. But before we get into all the business stuff, man, because you've done a lot of shit, let's go back and, let's talk a little bit about your story. How did you get into what you're doing today? Because I mean, you didn't wake up one day and had all this stuff happening, right? So paint the picture, where you've been, what you've seen.
Yeah, man. So I grew up a screw up in many different ways and just misguided at the end of the day. That's what it comes down to, lack of education
Mm-hmm.
and anyway, grew up in New Jersey by a single parent mother. She's diagnosed as manic depressive bipolar, so that's kind of the little hex that was over our family for a while, but such a beast of a mother, like really put up with three misfits, that drove her crazy, but she did
Yep.
everything in her power to raise us as best as she could. And and yeah, I mean, we grew up. I'm the middle child, have two sisters, younger and older, different fathers, all of us. I met my father when I was 18 in court, so he could stop paying child support. So I never really had that male father figure, but
Okay.
the main like cause in and hurt in our family growing up was
Mm-hmm.
usually always around like money, right? It was
Yeah.
like, the stress of, because we lived off of Section 8 and like the government,
Yeah.
and like churches and schools giving out handouts to help us get by.
Right.
So the constant stress was like, hey, are we going to have enough for rent this month, or like utilities getting turned off? And
Right.
so at a young age, I was like, hey, I need to start working. I need to start making some money so I can, people in the neighborhood, they're buying quads
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. Like I wanted to keep up. And so I started looking for a job at age 12, well, age 9. I finally got my first job at age 12. And
Wow.
yeah, and yeah, quickly after that, I ended up in 8th grade, ended up getting introduced to smoking weed,
Yeah.
um, and fell in
Peer
love with that
pressure,
very
huh?
quickly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're, older, pretty girls. My best friend,
Sure.
I was like heartbroken that he was doing it because we were all, growing up against drugs. I grew up in my
Right.
family, having drugs in the house. So, um, was very against it, but the influence behind it really quickly changed.
Yeah.
So, so once I finally had that like release of like, hey, I like this. It was like the one time I got to relax and like not worry and just laugh, laugh a bunch. I was like,
Yeah.
hey, I want to keep doing this, but I knew if I was going to, I had to be the person within my group that like sold it
Yeah.
to my
You wanted to
friend.
be in control. You wanted to have some involvement. Absolutely.
I just wanted to smoke for free so I didn't have to pay for it because I knew I couldn't afford it. That's just straight up.
Right. Right.
Um So that snowballed out of control over time. And because I grew up poor, not used to having money. So every time I would sell something, make money, I would just take it back to my dealer and like, here, what can I get? And he'd give me more and more and more.
Yeah.
And after I did that for like 6 months to a year, I'm walking around with like 10 pounds and I'm like, you know, it's just, I'm like coming home with like a trash bag full and like my mom's like, what the hell are you doing? You know?
Yeah.
So it's just one of those crazy things. But
Right. Right. Man,
it led me into doing some crazy stuff out here. I had an
yeah.
explosion in my house making hash oil. I burnt 40% of my body. I had to learn how to walk again because they put me into a coma. I was bedridden for 3 weeks. Like,
Oh, wow.
yeah, it was wild. So a
You
lot of
know
stuff
what's
with
really
that.
crazy, as you were talking about, when you got your first job and got into weed selling also, is that, there was something there that I think is important. First of all, you're talking about things that most people are afraid to talk about in their childhood. They're afraid to talk about it because they're afraid of being judged. I've been in similar situations where being afraid of judgment also, and I thought, what the fuck is wrong with me, man? Like, why am I so different? Why am I having these experiences? So when you were talking about like when you started selling weed, as you saw it as a way to exhilarate, man, you were making money. You thought it was a way to live a life. When you were smoking, you're like carefree, right? And when you're young, it's such an age. I mean, you were growing up in such a poor household too, that you felt like this was an exit for you. This was a way to view the world in a different way. And then not having a fatherly figure though, man, like that must have been rough, because I think that's how a lot of kids end up on the fence, right? End up in prisons, end up incarcerated, whatever, right? Because they didn't have that fatherly figure. So how was that for you? I mean, how did you cope with that aspect of it? I'm curious.
Yeah, not having the father figure or just even male influence. The males that were in my life, it was people dating my mom that, I was the
Yeah.
only son, so they were trying to win me over quickly, promising the world and never delivering.
Yeah.
I felt like that shaped me into very an old school mentality of like like your word is so crucial.
Yeah.
So I'm very, if I say something, I'm gonna do it one way or the other.
Yeah.
Um, or like I'll man up to it and apologize, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of these guys I noticed didn't do that type of stuff, but I really didn't think, I didn't know like having a father
Yeah.
figure would be important. My mom handled, she wore the pants, she played both roles and she did
Yeah.
as best as she could. So I really didn't notice how much I needed it until like I was older, like
Yeah.
dealing with certain problems that like men and women think very opposite in certain things.
Right.
Guys are very problem solvers, like, and women like uh to a certain degree talk it out and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's odd, but I wasn't stressing out too much about it or realized the importance of it until I was older.
Well, I think you kind of built that backbone. It sounds like, like after you experience, like you said, I mean, all these guys that were coming around were more
Yeah,
interested of just dating your mom, and like you learn at a very young age what's the meaning of your word. That your
yeah,
word is gold. I mean, especially in this digital age that we live in now and social media. That, like, let's just face it, man. Like people have a hard time believing a good thing if you hit them with a 10-foot pole.
yeah.
Literally, they just do. So like your
That's
word
true.
is bond. That's
Yeah,
important.
yeah,
That's how old school business was done is, you spit on the hand, shook your hand and said, all right, we're fucking doing business. We're going to do this shit. All right. You don't have any paper. You don't have anything. You just had your word face to face, looked each other in the eyes and said, all right, we're going to fucking do this. So that's really important because most kids, never learn that at such a young age. And you did because you were an observant. You
yeah,
saw it, you experienced it. I'm sure in part it was traumatic because you're growing up and you're like, man, like where's my life going, right?
yeah.
Oh, at some point, like where the fuck is my life going, right? What am I gonna end up doing, right? And so when you got to 18 years old, you got to see your dad. What kind of a mentality? I mean, you're 18 years old, you're an adult, at that point. Like, what were you thinking at that point? Like, did you know what you wanted to do with your life, or?
Man, I was all over the place, honestly. I really wanted to become, I loved cooking. I loved, like, I grew up in working in restaurants at a
Sure.
young age. So I enjoyed, like, the feeling of cooking something, creating something amazing, and then, like, the faces of people enjoying it. So
Yeah.
I thought I wanted to do that until everybody at the restaurants that I worked at, like, talked me out of it because they hated their life, you know? And, so it really just like I wasn't trying to become a drug dealer, but
Yeah.
it turned into that, and I ended up developing very good like communication skills, body
Yeah.
language, business skills, really, and it snowballed out of control. So I really wanted to just almost be like an investor of taking the money that I was earning in the bad things and
Yeah.
hopefully get some kind of guidance to put it into restaurants because that's all I knew, you know?
Yeah. There's oh my God, I was trying to Google it actually. Um, it's a quote by Jim Rohn, I believe, actually, that goes along the lines of, I believe it's Jim Rohn. The formal education will help you earn a living. Real education will help you build a fortune. And so when
Yeah.
you were talking about like, you turn into a drug dealer, man, which honestly, that is a fucking job in itself. That is a career for some people, and you
Yeah.
didn't know any better. But the reality of things is that there were fundamentals there that are applicable not only in business but in life. Because, like you said, you learn about communication, you learn about negotiation, you learn about the importance of. Because look, when you're dealing with drugs, man, and you tell somebody you bring in their fucking weed and you don't bring it, shit's gonna blow up. All
Yeah.
right, like it just will. So I think it's even more intricate in that aspect. And you were exposed to this at an early age. So you took these fundamentals, right? These essentials, which very awkward fucking scenario in business. And
Yeah.
then, so what did you do with those fundamentals? Like, how did you apply them later on in life?
Yeah. So the first spot that I realized, and this is like later on down the road, before I had my explosion here in San Diego, and really blew everything up. I always had
Yeah,
one foot in, one foot out because I was just a workaholic, like bring in
yeah.
some money. and and I was working for Kirby vacuum cleaners. It's like a sales position, door to door sales.
Remember
And
those?
dude, I realized quickly like I was good at door to door sales because I'm from New Jersey. The
Right,
mentality of like like screw you or whatever
right.
like getting shut down at a door, that's not going to stop me. I could care less. Um, if there's a no soliciting sign on the door, that's not going to stop me,
Right.
so so basically I was good at that, and then just dealing and learning those development skills over the years growing up. I was good at selling,
Yeah.
so they gave me a product, they gave me a script on how to present it, I presented it, and I did very well quickly. So that's where kind of I first noticed like, holy cow, like now that I have guidance
Yeah.
that's more on the right side somewhat, like
Right.
I can really almost sharpen up what I've been going down, I guess, that path.
Man, Kirby vacuums are a fucking bitch to sell. I'll tell you that. I mean, I remember it might
It's
have
like
been when I was.
$3,500 or something crazy.
They are. That's just it. I remember. I think it was maybe in high school, like 17 or 18 years. It might have been like my junior or senior year. Like, of course, I'm a kid who barely graduated high school, so I didn't know what the fuck I wanted to do. And I was approached to sell Kirby. I'm looking at this thing, I'm like, yeah, it looks amazing, but I know how to sell the fucking thing. And I was in part largely because was overthinking it. But to
Sure.
you, it came natural because I think you had people skills, you had communication skills, and you knew how to apply them. Which in reality, as they say, you can sell $100 lollipop to a woman in a red dress if you have communication skills, if
Yeah.
you know how to create appeal, right? So it's just the principle of that. So you learned these skills, which was again in a very awkward scenario, how to sell, how to communicate. I want to segue more into, because there's a couple of things on here that I really wanted to talk about. So one thing that you mentioned about is that you had two felonies and you were on house arrest for blowing yourself up in an explosion in 2012 from masking hash oil. Let's talk about this. Like,
Yeah.
how the
Yeah,
fuck did
man.
this happen?
So once I left New Jersey, because I was in a bad relationship. We were just bad for each other, and my name was blowing up in a negative way. I've had guns to my head, knives to my throat,
Oh,
friends of mine murdered, people in jail, like crazy stuff.
yeah,
So, and the cops knew about me. So I was like, before I had best friends rob my house for a bunch of money, like it was just
yeah,
not good
yeah.
atmosphere. So I got out of there. I visited a friend out here, fell in love with it 2 months later. I'm here in San Diego, and and I didn't know any better. So I was growing marijuana in my house, in my apartment
Yep.
in Pacific Beach. Um, Crazy stuff, man. And yeah, I was like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I had my card that like legally I was allowed to grow. I was
Right.
allowed to smoke, but before and after products, I was allowed to have. The whole making it was an issue. So they charged, I had an explosion in my house. All the windows went out. I was just cocky, right? Like I always got away with a
Sure.
lot of crazy stuff. So um, that day, like I truly believe like God was protecting me because I had gloves on, like baseball gloves. I never even played baseball, but I put gloves on that day, which saved my hands. Like I got skin graft up to like my
I
wrist.
think so, man. Not to abruptly interject, but when you said I think so, I'm a firm believer that things happen for a reason. I think you wore those
100%.
gloves on that day for a specific reason because shit was coming. You know what? God was testing you because of, what? You got too egocentric, which
Yep.
ego is great in business. Don't get me wrong. But when you get really egocentric and it's overly confident, right?
Yeah.
When you get too cocky, like you said,
Yeah.
and I know a lot of successful people who are cocky, but this is like the cocky where you feel like self entitlement almost, right? That you feel like you can do anything. You're bulletproof. That's when you realize that you're not bulletproof, right?
Yeah. I got away with so much that I was and like skin
Mm-hmm.
close to so many situations. And with my personality type, like if
Yep.
I would have just got an arrest or a little slap on the wrist, it wouldn't have changed my life.
Yep.
And I felt the depression, I felt the misguidance. Like I knew I wanted something bigger, but I didn't know where to go. So like
Yep.
God really needed to do something. I needed to have an explosion in my life. And that's what happened. So I was on fire, clothes burned off my body. I burnt 40% of my body. I got skin graft on my arms and legs, and they put me into a coma, induced coma for a week. 3 surgeries later, 3 or 4 weeks later, I ended up leaving the hospital. I had to learn how
Mm-hmm.
to walk again, and then a couple weeks after that, my house got raided again, and they arrested me for those charges finally.
Oh
Um,
wow.
so
So let
so
me ask you this,
yeah,
okay? Because I'm a sucker for this, man. Is most people when they hit rock bottom, because let's face it, you get arrested, you get in a felony, you're like, all right, they caught me with my pants down at this point, right?
yeah, or
What's
naked, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like you're like, fuck, I'm ground zero, man. Like I got nowhere to run. So as you're going through this, most people, start to play the victim mindset and they're like, oh, I should have known better and blah 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 and all this. What was going through your mind? How did you emerge from that situation, like mentally? Like, did you tell yourself, okay, I need to change my life? What was going through your mind?
Yeah, man. Honestly, right when the explosion happened and I
Yeah,
jumped up, I was on fire. I knew all the windows were out. I had my neighbors screaming and my house, filling up with smoke and my dogs just like sitting there, like, what the fuck?
yeah,
I realized I'm going to jail, and I was like, fuck. Like, I was
yeah,
just like, dang, this is crazy. So as I'm in the hospital and no charges are getting pressed on me yet, but I
yeah,
knew they're coming. And I just naturally felt so bad for everybody else that was involved. That was like helping me
yeah,
out, like nurses and stuff like that. I'm like, man, I'm such a piece of shit for like putting myself in this situation, and then like, other people near me having to deal with it.
yeah,
Um, even though it's their job, but it's still like, fuck, like I really screwed this up.
You know, there's one thing, there's probably one of the hardest things I've learned in life and in business is that when you start to realize that losing is actually a way to grow,
Yeah.
that's when, so the fact that you were able to experience this and you went through this experience, which was traumatic and at the same time was all your fault, you knew
Oh
it,
yeah.
right?
100%.
And you started to take accountability, though, is I think what happened is this,
Yeah.
you said, this is my doing, I did this, right? I have to take responsibility. You stood up to it. Most people run from it. Most
Oh yeah.
people will run from it and say, try to wash their hands and see how they come back on top again. But you took responsibility, and taking responsibility for your actions, especially your terrible choices, is how you actually grow. So you knew, I mean, you felt bad for, the nurses and the doctors that helped you. But after that, what happened after that? How did you emerge from that? How did you, because you got into real estate, you got into credit, making money,
Yeah.
the pandemic last year and really thriving and growing. But if you think back, like what helped you like escape from that situation?
Well, while I was in the hospital and I like woke up from the coma and I was realizing like shit, like something needs to give.
Yeah.
I started reading and I like never, I think at that time I was like 24 or 25 and I probably I was a little bit younger than that, maybe 22, but
Hmm.
I probably only read maybe like 4 books in my life at that time.
Okay.
So yeah, so I started diving into education
Yeah.
and then I previously worked for a real estate investment company here locally.
Hmm.
While I was like doing Kirby, I got recruited over there and um, I saw the systems in place. So I didn't get that much education, but I got a hell of a lot of motivation. And afterwards, that was kind of the path I started deep diving into. I was on house arrest later on,
Yeah.
um, and that gave me a lot of time. Gave me a lot of
Yeah.
time at the house to stay focused.
I was gonna say, I mean, when you're house arrest, is like I think most people are like, oh, I'm fucked, and then here's you're like, okay, this is a massive opportunity to transform my life, and that's what you did, right? You
Yeah.
started to invest more in yourself,
Yep.
reading, educating yourself, making connections, talking to people. Which kind of leads me to, there's a couple of important things I actually wanted to talk with you about. So I know one of the things on your bio mentions that you've done private mentorship to some high profile students and former NFL players. So let's talk about that. Like, how did all that happen, right? Like, how did
Yeah.
that all come together?
Yeah, so I wanted to get I realized I was falling in love with real estate. The more education and books I
Mhm.
read on real estate, on all the different ways to make money in it, I was like falling in love. I wanted to learn more and more, and that was different for me, and it was
Right.
very gravitating. So, um, but I was working like restaurants. Like I found myself in debt from the explosion. I paid that off in 1 year. And then afterwards, I started stacking up money, but it was like 35K that I saved up
Yep.
within 2 years. It doesn't go that far in real estate. So I ended up leveraging my credit. I was educating myself on credit as well at the time. And I figured out how I could basically use my credit cards to purchase properties and complete my remodels.
Yeah.
And over time, just diving into that education, and really trial and error, making a lot of mistakes, I started showing other people. Well, people were like asking me, like, "Hey, how the hell are you doing real estate 3,000 miles away?" Because
Yeah.
a lot of our property started over in Ohio, and I was showing them like, "Hey, it's not that hard. Like, it's systems, and
Right.
everybody acknowledges real estate's amazing, but they all put it on the pedestal like, well, once I get successful in this area and have enough money to, then I'll invest in real estate. And that just wasn't the case for me. So I utilized credit
Yeah.
and I started showing other people, hey, you can do the same exact thing if you just get your credit right. And that's
Yeah.
kind of how it snowballed.
You know, um, It's interesting you mentioned credit because I wanted to touch upon that. I think a lot of Americans, especially, don't realize how intricate credit is, whether it's a credit card or just your credit
Great.
score, really.
Yeah.
And in essence, how, from 500 credit score to 700 credit score, those 200 points can give you some massive buying power. And if you get them buying power, so you mentioned something earlier about cash flow and money, which I actually got into an argument with some people because a lot of people was like, oh, well, a lot of money is not going to bring you happiness, blah, 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 all this stuff. And I'm like,
Jesus.
most people don't understand how to utilize credit and money, right?
Yeah.
They don't because they're so ignorant to it, right? Because of what they've perceived in the world. The way you utilize money and credit is for what you want to accomplish. So here's an example. If you buy a bigger house, your dream house, right? You buy your dream house, you need more money for that, right? So you
Yep.
buy your dream house, right? Now that dream house is going to help you create priceless memories with your family. And for me as a father, it's like, buying a dream house, I know that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I need more money to buy that dream house so I can create those experiences, and those experiences are going to bring me happiness. So it's all correlated, cash flow, buying stuff or materialistic things. And most people just don't fathom that because they think that, oh, more money is not going to fix my relationship. And it's like, well, if your relationship's shitty, you got to work at it. Money's not going to fix it. If you throw money at it, that's just a wrong comparison. But let's talk more about, like, how did you educate yourself on, like, credit? I mean, you talked about credit cards, but, and how did you use that buying power for real estate?
Yeah, I feel like I got to touch on that too, like what you were talking about, because it drives me crazy when other people say, money doesn't buy happiness. I always like to say, well, what does poor buy you? Like it doesn't buy you a damn thing. And it feels pretty damn good when you can afford to bless other people and give back, make a difference, So it's really crazy, just that mindset behind that. But credit overall, man, it's literally changed my life. Like real estate has been the blessing that changed my life, but without credit, I wouldn't have been able to do as much or scale as much as I have.
Right. Right. So so we talked about credit and real estate, because I know there's a lot of people, especially now with this real estate boom, that a lot of people are trying to get into it. But I think one thing you mentioned earlier that I think has been very successful for you is that through a crash and burn, you created these processes and checks and balances that have really helped you I mean, through resources probably too, and connecting with other people as well, but being able to, create checks and balances systems, right, that have helped you reach profitability and make money, and being able to get things, reinvest more into real estate. So is that what kind of brought you into, like, private mentorship and all of that? And because I know you also do Walmart automation was one of the things that you mentioned. So can you talk a little bit about that, like how the mentorship came about?
Yeah, so it came about just from people wanting to know, and like they wanted to jump into real estate as well. So I was like, hey, I can show you what I've done. Like, I don't know if it's going to work for you, but I can show you, and I'll give you the time. At the time, I had more available time, so it worked out. And I was just doing it for free in the beginning, and until there was enough people that they were getting results and also taking up too much of my time. then the results spoke for themselves. I taught somebody, one of my first students, they got, and he's still with me today. I think it's like going on his 4th year of mentorship yearly. And right when he started with me, 3 weeks later, he got his first property under contract, and I walked him through the whole process. He didn't have to raise any money, utilize credit, like the whole nine. And yeah, I mean, it's been a blessing. So over time, I had way too many people. Like it was just word of mouth of coaching, and it became overwhelming because I had 8 to 10 Zoom calls per day. People are asking the same like question. So I finally took a pause, and I was like, hey, I got to turn this into a course. I did 1 month of just recording videos, and then I turned it more into a mastermind group, and we've helped out hundreds of people at the moment, thousands of people nationwide, which is awesome. And yeah, it's just been ridiculous amounts of breakthroughs. So we look at credit as like a 4-step process. It's like educate, fix, build, and then leverage. I like the build part and the leverage, but a lot of people need to start off with the education and fixing, truthfully.
Sure. You know, one thing as you were kind of describing of how you've built it up is, you know, I think there's a couple of things that are essential is that I think in the beginning you had created enough awareness around yourself and what you were doing, you know, through social media, through word of mouth, you know, however, basically by showing things that you cared about, you know, your interest, which was real estate and credit. At the time, to the point that you created so much awareness that people started asking you about this. They were starting to take interest, and that's so you were creating appeal through awareness. And when you were creating that appeal, that's when people started reaching out to you. And then before you knew it, I think that's so powerful, you know, and I'm a huge fan of that too, is just that if there's something that you're passionate about, you know, that you feel is your purpose, that you're calling, you know, figure out a way how to create massive exposure around it. In fact, recently I just talked about what is your brand, you know, so tell people, you know, who you are, what you do, what value you have to offer. And that's what you did with real estate and credit. And you told it how it was, which I absolutely love because, you know, real estate is one of those things that I feel like when you get to a certain level, some people get the wrong impression, you know, like, oh, well, this person is already doing 6 figures a month or whatever. You know, it's like they're not reachable. But it's like you realize that they started from zero, just like how you're starting. Like people really don't appreciate that, you know. So so you created this mastermind group, this course, you know, now teaching thousands of people nationwide basically how to leverage credit to get into the real estate game, right?
Yeah. And really, like a lot of my following is real estate investors. However, you know, there's just the everyday entrepreneur. You know, if you want to better your life, if your mindset is in the right position and you've worked out that crap in the past, because we all have to go through mindset first, I truly believe. But afterwards, when you're ready to start growing and like really get the credit right, be able to build up several 6 figures or even 7 figures in funding, and then you have some ideas of like where to put it to work, then you know it's really a good fit. And a majority of those people end up being real estate investors.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. I love, you know, the entire story of how you started out. I love that, you know, it's almost like it is a rags to riches story. Not almost, it's a rags to riches story because, you know, and that's one of the reasons why I start off with asking about everyone's story, because as you said, what does poor get you? I mean, if rich, that doesn't make you happy, what does poor get you? Well, it doesn't get you shit. You know, in fact, it buries you in debt. It buries you in stress and anxiety and depression and suicide. You know, that's literally what it does. But and I'm so happy for you for everything that you've done and where you've gotten to, because a lot of people don't make it, man, because they give up, you know.
They give up. That's the thing. Yeah. I'm too driven to like,
Yeah.
I'm very stubborn. That's just what it comes down to. And I get it from my mom.
Well, that's a good thing to be stubborn. That means that I think you stand by. I mean, stubbornness can, you know, have multiple meanings. One of them is that you stand firmly by what you believe in. So you're so stubborn, but in essence, it's also commitment and dedication. So it kind of cross-pollinates a little bit, right? And even now, I mean, you've been in real estate and credit, doing all this for at least 5 years now, maybe?
It's been 6 years for real estate, and then credit. I surprisingly, I didn't realize at the time, but it was like 10 years ago, and I was doing it. I ended up getting robbed for some drug stuff, and I ended up doing a little credit hacking. I didn't even realize at the time to get back on my feet.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, as we kind of come to the tail end of the episode, a couple other things actually that I wanted to ask you, because I know, you know, real estate and credit, you know, those are your two passions, obviously. But, you know, what advice would you have for people, especially when it comes to, you credit and the way they can leverage credit for real estate and getting into real estate, like what are some things that if you were to rewind, 6 to 10 years ago,
Oh
like
yeah.
what mistakes did you learn most from that you would advise people not to go through?
Man, that's such a good question. It really comes down to how the lenders and banks are really judging us. Like, understand that
Yeah,
there's 6 boxes that make up our FICO. So once you actually deep dive into that, you can easily get the education platform on like Credit Karma.
yeah,
It's not. I wouldn't recommend it for the fight. It's not a FICO. It's a Vantage
right,
score, so it's not accurate. But
right,
good education on there, needless to say. And once you start thinking like the banks and actually like do what they do to us, flip the script of borrowing the money from the banks, just like they borrow money from us and give 0% interest or very close to it,
right.
and then put it to work in other assets, then that's what I would highly start like encouraging the listeners to start preparing their minds for, because man, there's ridiculous amounts of opportunity out there. There's a ridiculous amounts of funds, and there's no shortage or lack on that. So if you have some awesome ideas and willing to take the risk and like take action, then that's where you're going to see the results.
It's so interesting you said that because principally it doesn't matter what you do in business or in life is that mental commitment that you just
Oh
said.
yeah.
I mean, if you mentally commit to wanting to real estate and leveraging credit and finding funds and why get into real estate? Because I think there's also a lot of people that get into real estate just for pure money reasons,
Yeah,
but
the wrong reasons. Yep.
yeah, those are the wrong reasons. You got to find the right reasons. If this is something that you truly want to get into to be successful with, and how is it going to help your life? How is it going to help, expand your life, right? Because I think with real estate, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of people don't understand when you get into real estate, it's about hopes and dreams, right? Because you're buying property, you're buying or selling or remodeling property that people are going to live in, right?
Yeah.
To make memories. So when you realize like, oh shit, this is more than just real estate and making money, and you really truly invest into it, which principally again is anything that you do in life and business, right?
Yep.
I really enjoyed the conversation, man. I mean, you mentioned so much. I love your story. Again, congratulations. I mean, literally from rags to riches. But before we sign off, throw out some links, some handles, emails, whatever you can think of, people that can connect with you online if they want to learn more about real estate and credit, or just, connect with you for a conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, when it comes down to any type of real estate education or even credit, we give out on our podcast weekly every Monday for actually right here, yeah, Ready Set Go Real Estate Investing
Right.
Podcast. Otherwise, if anybody wanted to reach out to me on Instagram, you can do so. It's Brandon Elliott Investments. Facebook.com/Brandon Elliott Investor. And if you guys needed any like credit repair done for you services, that would be creditrepairmobile.com. Otherwise, if you're
Okay.
looking to get truly educated on credit, like in the mastermind group and so forth, learn how to be able to fix and build up huge lines of credit and put it to work, then creditcounselelite.com is where you would
Okay.
find that.
Awesome, man. Well, Brandon, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. Lots of good info, amazing conversation. And here's to the second part of 2021. And hopefully it's going to be an even better year than it has been for you thus far.
Yeah, man. Hey, Ivan, I appreciate you so much. Nothing but respect for you. I love your energy and keep doing your thing, man. Cheers.